Hello, this is a video to help you get started in Module 11 about scatterplots. Scatterplots are a kind of graph that we haven't dealt with before, so I thought we should have a little video. To start with, I'm going to click on here and get a plot going. I'm going to make it a little bigger and easier to see, hopefully. And I'm going to choose length as our first variable. Notice I'm choosing a quantitative variable. That's really important. We've always been dealing with quantitative variables for the most part. And I'm going to stack it like we have before. And you can see right away, this is stuff we've done before. This is a nice dot plot that's pretty symmetric and has an outlier out here for sure. And maybe these are outliers, maybe that's an outlier, but let's look at this outlier here. It's a Buick Roadmaster that just happens to be pretty short, only 126 inches, you can see right there. If you want to click around, you can see some of the others. This longest car in the data set is a Lincoln Town Car, which happens to be, almost 20 feet long. But, and we could go on and talk about spread, but what I want to do here is get on to scatterplots, because that's really the goal here. And so I'm going to choose another quantitative variable. I'm going to choose weight, and I'm going to put it here on the side. When I do that and then click on a dot and spread it all the way vertically, I get a scatter plot. And that is what we're really after. Now, first, let's just see what we're seeing on this scatter plot. We see a lot of cars kind of here in the middle. And we also see like one car right there and some few down here. But here's the big clump. Also, let's look at what we see about any particular car. I'm just going to choose one kind of at random. Let's choose this one. That car right there, we can see a couple things on. Even if we didn't have the data card, we could see by looking down how long it is, and by looking sideways what its weight is. You can see that for any dot. Now we can kind of eyeball it. If I eyeball it, it's be about 197 inches maybe. I could confirm that by putting in a reference line, and we can move that over there. See right there. So maybe it's only 196 inches. Let's check over it. Oh yes, see, 196 inches. We could also look the other way. We could put a horizontal reference line in, and then we're seeing it's about 3250, and yeah, it says 3240 over here. So you can either eyeball it or use the reference line, but the point is that you should be able to see in any scatter plot both down to this variable, which in this case is length, and know something about this dot, in this case a car, or sideways over here to this variable, in this case weight, and know something about that same dot. We know both the length and the weight of that particular car just by its position in the graph. This is true for any other dot too. So if I say want to know about that dot right there, I'll move my reference lines over to there and get something that looks kind of like that. And I see, well, it's about 169 inches long and about 2,890 pounds. When I look this way, 169 inches down here, almost 2,900 pounds here. Let's click on it now and see if those estimates are right. 169 pounds, almost 2,900 pounds. Yep. I'm sorry, 169 inches, almost 2,900 pounds. So we eyeballed it pretty good, especially with the help of our reference line. So the scatter plot is telling us about all these different cars. We can see the same thing here about this particular car. That is going to be, I think, our same road. See, it's our Buick Roadmaster, that outlier we saw before, which happens to be very short, but still weighs quite a lot. So that's the kinds of stuff we can just see right away in a scatter plot, both variables, both this one and that one. And there's some other things to consider. One is we want to think about what they call the direction of the scatter plot. And this direction, you can kind of see it goes, except for this outlier, and that is an outlier, mostly it kind of goes in this direction. As you can see my little cursor, it's going up and to the right, or down and to the left. And when it does that, we call that a positive scatter plot, a positive association. I'll show you an example of other kinds, a negative or a no association in a minute, but right now if it's going up to the right, that means a positive association. The other thing is it's pretty much a straight line, and so we say that the form is linear. So we have a direction that's positive and a form that's linear. And then you'll also notice that it's pretty close to a line. And when it's pretty close to a line, not very many dots away from that line, that means it's pretty strong. All these ideas we'll be exploring it more in the future, but I'm just trying to give you a sense of it to begin with. This, of course, is then an outlier. So again, that's positive direction, linear form, strength is pretty strong, and we have an outlier out here at around 126 inches and about 4,200 pounds, 4,100 pounds. So that's kind of how you describe these. Then let's look at another variable. Let's put in here city miles to gallon. And what you're going to see is a really different appearance, because now, oh, I'm sorry, I need to go back. Let me show you one thing, and it's good contrast. So here again, right, we had that positive linear, pretty strong form with one outlier. And one thing to notice is that this means that cars that are short tend to be lighter, and then as you get a little longer, they tend to go up in weight. And as you keep on getting longer, you get heavier. And that makes sense, right? Longer cars probably are going to be heavier than shorter cars. There is this one exception here, this outlier, but mostly the cars are, as they get longer, they tend to get heavier. Now, if we go back to city miles per gallon here, what you're going to see is a real different pattern. So first of all, let's just go through this. It's now going pretty much kind of down and to the right. Instead of up and to the right, it's going down and to the right. And that means that it's now a negative direction. And it's still pretty linear, not as good as the last one, but it's still fairly much like a straight line. And so that's still a linear form. Negative direction, linear form. But, like I was just saying, it's not as good, it's not as much like a line as the last one. You know, if we drew a line in here, it would pretty much, and actually I can draw a line in here if I work on it right here. If I take hold of this line and I kind of draw a line in here, you know, the dots are further away from the line than they were in the previous graph. And that means that it's not as strong. So, oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Let me delete that. There we go. So what that means is that we have now, again, a negative direction, a linear form, and the strength is, you know, sort of moderate or even maybe a little bit weak, not as strong as the previous one. We still have an outlier. This one is far away from the general pattern. And if we were to describe that general pattern, it would be something like this. When cars are short, they tend to get better mileage in the city. And then as they get longer, they usually get less good mileage. And again, that kind of makes sense. You know, bigger cars, longer cars would probably not get as good a mileage. Smaller cars get better mileage. So that kind of fits our thinking, or at least I hope it does. Now, I want to show you one that doesn't really have a pattern, or the pattern is much less clear. So I'm going to change the variables completely. I'm going to put horsepower here and passenger here. And what you're going to see is that this it sort of seems to go up and down at the same time. That it's just kind of scattered all over the place. It's a case where there really isn't a direction, and the form is even kind of ambiguous. And it's pretty weak. So I would say basically no direction or no association, and pretty much no form and very weak strength. Maybe these are outliers, but in this case, it's not even clear what an outlier means because there's no pattern to kind of fit into, and so it's hard to have an outlier at all. So this is kind of an introduction to scatterplots, and there's lots more to look at in the book and of course in our activities that we're doing. But I hope this is helpful, and email with questions, and of course we'll also ask questions in class. And thanks very much for listening in.